Paro is dreaming. Disturbing dreams. He wakes up, it says, Vatipa'im ruho, and his spirit was pounding. He needed to understand what these dreams were. These dreams are strange. There are emaciated cows swallowing whole fat cows, and doesn't look like anything's happened after they've swallowed them. These emaciated sheaves of grain emerge and swallow these big, huge, fat sheaves of grain. And it seems that something is wrong. Paro says that he wants to figure these dreams out. He looks to his wise men, the people who seem to know what's going on. He tells them his dream. They give their responses. Just doesn't sit well with him. It doesn't quell how it is that he feels. And so all of a sudden the cupbearer, remember him? He tells Paro, "Hata'ai ani maskir hayom." I must confess that I have sinned. There was a young Hebrew overseer in jail when I was there. Remember, you threw me in jail. Remember? Yeah. Well, when I was there was this young Hebrew who was an amazing dream interpreter. Actually had a dream, and we told him. I told him my dream. The baker told him his dream, and his interpretations were precisely right. Exactly what he said is what happened. He might be able to help. Paro says, well, then bring him along, please. I'd like to see him. They get him out of jail. They shower him, shave him, dress him, and bring Yosef in front of Paro. Paro says, listen, I've heard that you have a knack at dreams. Well, let me tell you my dream. I saw these emaciated cows. I have not seen such ugly, horrible cows in all of Egypt. And they ate these big fat cows, and you couldn't even tell that they ate these fat cows. They were just as emaciated as they were before they ate them. He goes on and tells the dreams. Yosef says, look, I am not the interpreter of dreams. God is the interpreter of dreams. But it seems to me that this is what's going on. The 7 emaciated cows and the 7 fat cows are 7 years each. There are going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And the 7 years of famine are going to be so terrible that they will not remember the 7 years of plenty that were before them. It will be a demoralizing and devastating experience for Egypt. Now, Your Majesty, if I can suggest, it would probably be a good idea to take advantage of the 7 years of plenty and store grain for the 7 years of famine. And that way, Egypt will be in a tremendous position economically. Paro hears this and he says, this is a brilliant dream. That's exactly what I believe these dreams were. As a matter of fact, I don't know about any of you, and he looks around to his court. I don't know anybody as smart as this young man. And he's a good-looking kid, actually, also. Yosef is about 30 years old at this time. Paro says, I would like to make you viceroy. He doesn't make him the Secretary of Agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture. He makes him viceroy, second in command to Paro. And the first thing that Paro does is put him in a convertible and ride him all over Egypt. He wants everybody to see Yosef. He wants people to recognize this is the new, young, bright, attractive, charismatic, intelligent leader of Egypt. And what he says to Yosef is, Al picha ishak kol ami. By your mouth, all of my nation will be satiated and sustained. Yosef hu mashbir bar. And indeed, that is what happened. There were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And at the 7 years of famine, Yosef had set up the country to be a tremendously powerful resource of grain, not only for Egypt, but for all of the neighboring countries. And Yosef is in full charge of everything. And meanwhile, back at home, the famine is heavy in the land of Canaan, and Yaakov sends his children down to Egypt to get some grain, because that's the only place to get grain. They go down to Egypt in order to be able to buy some grain, and of course, Yosef catches that these are his brothers coming down to Egypt. He recognizes them, they do not recognize him. He immediately goes into a scenario. He sees them, he says, I think you're spies. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you're spies. They say, no, we're not spies. We're just a family trying to feed our family. Our father's at home. Unfortunately, we had a brother who's lost, and we have a younger brother who stayed with dad back at home. He said, you have a younger brother? Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you bring your younger brother down here to meet me? And if you bring your brother down here to meet me, I will know that you are not spies. In the meantime, I'm going to hold your brother Shimon in jail, and you guys can go back and come back with Binyamin. And when you come back with Binyamin, you can get Shimon, and I will not consider you spies. In the meantime, you can take the grain that you've purchased, and I'll see you in a bit. So they take the grain that they purchased, On their way back, they find that all of the money that they used to pay for the grain has been returned to them in their sacks of grain. They are very confused about this. They go back home, they tell their dad. Their dad says, I cannot believe that you told them about Binyamin. Why would you tell him about Binyamin? Did he ask you about Binyamin? No, you had to tell him, volunteer. Shimon's gone, Binyamin is going to be gone, Yosef is gone, Alaya Kulana, this is all on me. What are you people doing to me? You're destroying me. They stick around until the grain ultimately is done. Yaakov says to them, look, it seems like this man is not really interested in money. It seems like he's really interested in getting to know you in the relationship. So why don't you get him a gift basket? And they put together a nice little gift basket with some dried fruits and nuts and so on and so forth. And they go back down to Egypt to find Yosef. They do find Yosef. And they say, look, we're really sorry. Here's the money. I mean, we didn't do this. I mean, we thought we paid everything we were supposed to, but we found the money in our bags. Yosef says, I don't know what you're talking about. I got all of the money. Anyway, welcome to Egypt. Is this your brother? Wow. And Yosef is overcome with emotion because he finally sees his brother Binyamin in front of him after all these years. He cries. There are actually many times where Yosef breaks down and cries and runs inside so that he can compose himself and not lose his emotions in front of his brothers. They sit, they eat, they drink, and they enjoy the time with each other. And after all of that time that they spend with Yosef, he sends them off and he tells his assistants, I want you to make sure that you take my goblet and put it into the sack of Binyamin as they're leaving. And that is precisely what happens. And as they're leaving, the national police come out, right? Sirens, you can imagine, blazing. Everybody, there's this whole army of police come out to stop them as they are traveling out of Egypt. They stop them and they say, you have stolen the goblet of the viceroy. They say, we don't know what you're talking about. He goes, we're going to have to search your bags. And they go out and they search the bags, and of course they find in Binyamin's bag a goblet. They say, oh my goodness. And they realize that they're going to have to now go back and deal with a horrible, horrible scenario. And so they are then ushered back into Yosef's presence to deal with this terrible framing that he's made for them and the crime that they now think Binyamin has caused and how they are going to get out of this. They had promised Yaakov that they would bring Binyamin back. Yehuda committed himself to protecting Binyamin, and so it will be an issue for Yehuda, and Yehuda will address it in next week's parasha.